synthesizing the is and the ought, a mother's instinct. The concept of maternal instinct is often interpreted as a natural synthesis of what is, the factual, biological, and situational realities, and the ought, the moral imperatives and necessary actions. And it represents a natural normativity where the biological reality of caring, providing, and protecting an offspring create an immediate, intuitive sense of what should be done and ought to be done. A mother's instinct, while often thought of as the sixth sense that comes with automatic love and knowledge, modern psychology suggests that it is actually a learned, adaptive, and evolving bond that is driven by experience, observation, learning, deep emotional attachment, and practice, which highlights how human experience can merge the observation of facts, the reality of what is, with a strong intuitive sense of obligation for action. It's a learned skill in navigating what is, discerning and actioning what ought. For it's in combining of what is the way things are with an established objective or desire, also known as the imperative moral obligation, that gives life its value. And we have that choice with us. For example, I'm driving in this little town with a bridge that was built in the 1920s. The is, and the fact is, this bridge will collapse if I drive on it. And the ought is, I want to live. I want to see tomorrow. Then the logical action is, I ought not to drive on this little bridge. A mother's instinct of synthesizing what is and what ought to be in action has been gifted to us all. We all have a mother who has given, shared generously. But you and I can still establish our own values by choosing what we ought to do based on our current situation, creating a personal synthesis of fact and value that is most appropriate for each of us. Therefore, the bridging of the gap and the responsibility for combining the two of the is, the fact, and the value is not restricted to mothers. It is in everybody's capability and process. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments, Jesus says. And all Jesus asks of his followers is their embrace of the love he has lived among them. The is. Embrace that as the goal or the ought for their own lives. Whatever you have experienced in our time together, the reality is of our journey. Embrace that as the goal, as the purpose, as the action of your life. That's Jesus' voice to his followers. I will ask the Father, who will give you another advocate, the Spirit of truth, that dwells and abides with you, and you know it. That is the descriptive reality. That's the fact. That's the is. The Spirit of truth abiding, dwelling in you. Those who have my commandments to love and keep them are those who love me and will be loved. That's the prescriptive, moral obligation, the ought, the actions. What we have attributed to mothers as their natural instinct is exactly what Jesus demonstrates in today's readings, who assures his followers they will not be alone in their efforts to live life shaped by love. Synthesizing of is and ought is not only the clothing of his followers with the communal identities, but also assuring them with an aura of factuality. That is life. I drove yesterday and I was driving behind a car, and at the back of this car are the words, "Do you follow Jesus this close?" And I thought, oops. Yes, I do, in my heart, follow the ways of Jesus. And I wondered if I was following too close, too dangerously close, or was I meant to be edging closer? The love Jesus asks his hearers, his followers, to embrace is not an abstract philosophical concept. It's not a feeling, but simply the lived reality that is revealed in the life, in the relationships, in the actions of a simple Nazarene who looks and talks like them and lives simply among them. He feeds the hungry, heals the sick, has a meal with the marginalized, crosses barriers of exclusion, speaks and acts towards women with care and with regard. The ought and actions we are also called to. Love is seen in Jesus' life as service and compassion. It's also seen in his fierce protest against those who abuse this vision of the value of each person and the importance of each one, and the importance of an ethic of mutual regard and care for one another, just like a mother's instinct. I watched the kids' show the other day, and there's an interviewer that interviews toddlers, very young ones. And the interviewer asked this young girl, "Who do you like best at home, mommy or daddy?" And the girl, without missing a beat, "Grandma." Why? No rules. I've been mothered a few times and told that I'm giving double standards to my grandchildren, and saying, "Mom, We are meant to give the children discipline. And I say, that's your job. Mine is just to love them to bits. No wonder the young ones opt for grandma over the rules of mothers. But it's a joy, it's a gift to be having mothering hearts, and that is all that Jesus is asking us through this reading from John. Jesus is not interested in power and domination, hence calling us that all we do is simply to synthesize our realities and our oughts, what needs to be done, imagine that power that has its goal as the well-being of all people, all persons, regardless of status, culture, theological view, or any other given label. That is the love that we are invited to action. Jesus was actioning God's love, and God's love is that both a source of our lives, the is of our lives, and the ought, the goal of our lives. It's that love that is life-giving, just as a mother's love. We're all meant to be mothers of God because God is always needing to be born in the form of love, of grace, of caring, of helping, of healing and reconciliation and appreciating. And we all have the capacity to be and do that. A community of hope is born when the Spirit of truth appears in our own lives and our own actions. And that's the outcome of synthesizing is and ought, which is not just mother's instinct, but an everybody's responsibility. You ready for it? Amen.